Good morning. It's May 17th, 2022, and welcome to today's episode of Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. And I see Claudette's in there in the audience already. Good to see you. I'd like to start out, remind everybody, yes, those comments are welcome. Get in there in the comment scroll, say hi, send questions, send critique. That's fine. I don't necessarily read them all out, but I see them all there and I appreciate it. It keeps things active, makes this live format all the better and all the more important. Because otherwise we could just record this. But I want that interaction. I want to see you guys talking with each other and know that this is happening as we go. So it's great to see you in the comment scroll and see you viewers out there. Let's start on some of the lighter things before we get into some heavy stuff today. It's National Cherry Cobbler Day. You don't want to miss that. National Cherry Cobbler Day. I don't know where they come up with all these things, but I got a great listing. And yes, as I start my shows off, I just want to remind you, because every day is special, right? So that's one of the things. Or for people not into the cherry cobblers, it's also Pinot Grigio Day. So if you want some white wine and the nice weather, things such as that, today is the day to get into your Pinot Grigio. And do something a little different. Our guests today, we've got two Western Standard columnists, writers, reporters, and that's Lee Harding and Arthur Green. And they've both written dueling columns on who they think is going to win the Battle of Alberta. Lee Harding thinks it's going to be in the bag for the Oilers, and Arthur Green thinks it's going to be the Flames. So we're going to bring them both on to duke it out on here and make their bold predictions. And of course, when the series is over, one of them is going to have to eat some crow. I will also play an interview I had with Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate, Scott Aitchison. He came into the studio. He was here in person, but it was a little bit ago. We had to record it. That's the hard part with the live stuff, but still it was a good chat. And he's been an interesting candidate. You know, he stood out during the debates. He was more the voice of reason, a little more calm when they were all on each other's case. And he has some good policy points that he's getting into. So I'm going to get on to a little more serious subject matter, though, and it's stuff that's got me worked up today. So yesterday, Calgary's police service released information confirming what many of us already pretty much knew and assumed. The incident leading to the death of Angela McKenzie was not a road rage incident as initially reported. The mother of five was killed due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time, while a gangster was chasing another vehicle and firing upon it in Forest Lawn in Calgary. The other development that is surprising nobody out of this as well is that the prime suspect in the killing of this woman was a criminal well known to police. In fact, he'd been charged with no less than 6 attempted murders only a few years ago. Talal Amr was charged with a number of crimes related to acting within a criminal organization, along with his string of attempted murders. He was sentenced to 7.5 years in May of 2019. With his time served, he was supposed to serve 3 more years. Clearly, he was released since then, though, and it's now cost the life of an innocent woman, and he's on the run. I didn't even want to show the picture of this scumbag, but since he is being sought, if you recognize this guy, call the police. The gang war of 2015 in Calgary led to over 200 shootings. Talal and his brother Barakat and 2 cousins, Badar and Abdul, were all listed as high-level gang participants at the time. We still couldn't keep them behind bars, though, apparently, and we had a pretty good idea at the time who these guys were and what they were about. Now, this year, Calgary's had over 50 shooting incidents and 12 homicides. I wonder how long it's going to be before the authorities publicly admit we're in the midst of another gang war. Now, the police can't be faulted here. They have no control over the sentencing. Our system is broken when it comes to imposing harsh sentences upon violent criminals, and the consequences are of the worst kind. What sort of judge in their right mind would think a man capable of that many attempted murders would be safe in society after a few years in jail? And it's not just gangland thugs killing innocent people. We've been releasing violent sex offenders into the general public, and it's cost lives as well. So last September in Hinton, Alberta, the bodies of Mikhail Bush and her 16-month-old son Noah were found. They were murdered, and there were acts of sexual assault and things done to them that I just won't even go into here. It was a crime of the most horrific sort. Robert Keith Major has pled guilty to that crime. Major is a known violent sex offender. The last time he was released into the public, the Edmonton police released a warning saying Robert Keith Major is a convicted sex offender and that the Edmonton Police Service has reasonable grounds to believe he'll commit another sexual offense against a female, including children, while in the community. Well, the police were correct, and now 2 lives have been lost as a result. Major had been in custody. He had a record of doing these actions, and authorities were confident he was going to reoffend, yet he was let loose into the community anyways, and a mother and child died in the most horrible of ways. Clearly, Major's past crimes and his behavior while in prison indicated he was a danger to the public. We do have a dangerous offender designation that can be applied to some criminals in order to extend sentences, but what the hell does it take to achieve such a status? Then last April, 23-year-old mother Jamie Lynn Shibley was murdered in Calgary. 37-year-old Gerald Russell Frommel was charged in the murder. He's another one in and out of prison his entire life for violent crimes. He's a scumbag. Does it have to be this hard to determine the dangerous offenders from the nonviolent ones? I understand that correction services are overwhelmed at times anyways, but our courts are overwhelmed as well. But is it impossible to prioritize? I don't care if we release some shoplifters and maybe some online fraudsters. If that's what it takes, make sure we keep the known violent prisoners in jail longer. Reforming criminals, it should be a goal. And second chances are important for criminals and offenders. But it really depends on the offense. Some offenses are just too heinous, and people demonstrate themselves to be too dangerous to give the benefit of the doubt. What is it going to take to get serious with sentences for dangerous offenders in Canada? I mean, if I had a dog with a propensity for attacking people and I let it loose in a playground, I'd be charged for putting the children at harm. Maybe it's time to hold the people who let these prisoners out accountable. I mean, who's sitting on these parole boards and deciding to release these people into the public? How often are judges called out for their light sentences with repeat violent offenders anyways? And maybe when we release these guys on parole, they should bill it with the people sitting on the parole board for their first week. If you think they're safe, have them for a roomie for a little while. See if that works out for you. There's only so much society can do to prevent crimes. I mean, sometimes people simply snap and it leads to terrible outcomes. There's no reason, though, we should keep hearing about violent reoffenders. We've caught them before. We know their propensities. We should be locking them up and throwing away the key. The protection of the innocent public has to take priority over the reformation of high-risk, known violent criminals. We've failed. And in Alberta alone, in less than a year, 3 mothers and a child have been murdered, and there was no reason for any of it. We already had those guys in jail, and we let them out. That's what's got me going today, and yeah, I'm pretty pissed off. So let's get on to some other news and bring our news editor, Dave Naylor, in to bring us up to date on other stuff that's happening right now.
Well, it's really infuriating, isn't it, Cory? And, you know, the guy wanted for the forced lawn things, only charged with manslaughter. So assuming he gets convicted, manslaughter, 7-8 years, out in 2, you know, and he'll be back on the streets, no questions asked. It's mind-boggling, this system. Well, how do you think my playoff beard's coming in?
It's filling in nicely there. You know, with a good long playoff run there, you might have something rivaling Derek's by the time we get to the end of this.
Yeah, quite doubtful. I'm fully incapable of growing a beard, but I am so lazy when it comes to shaving. This has given me a good excuse not to have to go through that every morning.
I understand.
So our most popular story this morning, Cory, is by our columnist, Alex McCall. He lives in the Beltline and was having some noise issues early this morning. About 2 a.m., there was some loud music coming. He thought it was from a nearby bar, but it turns out it was just a bit of a, well, I'll call him a nutcase with a loudspeaker in Tompkins Park. So he went over and asked the guy, hey, it's 2 a.m. Do you mind turning it down a bit? The guy responded by saying he's fighting for freedom. And he was also in Ottawa fighting for freedom then. And then he turned around and punched Alex in the face. So he called 911. The cops dutifully arrive. And he deals with the Calgary Police Service officer, a policewoman, who really didn't want to be there, according to Alex. And basically, he was disgusted with her attitude. So you can read all about his tale of morning problems in the Beltline. That's on our website right now. We've got a story from our Melanie Risden about the WHO is having, World Health Organization, they're having a big conference to set up some pandemic treaties for countries around the world, and there's some great concern over that. Our Amanda Brown has got a story from the Alberta Firearms Officer. She has written to the federal government to delay or cancel their implementation of their new long gun registry, which is coming, as you know. The story that's got me steamed this morning, Cory, is CBC looking to spend my taxpayers' dollars for 24/7 trauma support for their workers. For their reporters who may run into people who don't like what they do. 24/7 trauma support, Cory. You know what? If you're in Mexico, where a country where 11 journalists have been killed in 3 months, then hey, maybe you could use some trauma support. But I don't think that's the case in Canada, to be honest with you. You've got a column from your man Creighton giving some advice to Pierre Poilievre on where his campaign needs to go from here. Our man has done another story on a thing creating the buzz. Female vibrators are being given the thumbs up by the medical community as a good municipal or medicinal thing to do. We've also got a column from our Dave Makachuk looking back at Expo 67 and the Canada that he loved back then and road trips he used to take, and the country's not quite the same, and he's sort of living in a bit of despair. So that's what we've got up at the moment. We're just about to publish a story on Jordan Peterson, a social media phenomenon who has quit Twitter. Decided to quit last night after some comments he made on a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. Did not go down too well. So we'll have that story up shortly. And I'm looking forward to your argument between that lunatic Lee Harding, who's completely 100% wrong, and the great Arthur Green, who is completely 100% right.
Yeah, we'll see how that runs. I'm afraid I have seen some Edmonton fans polluting my comment scroll occasionally on the show here, and I guess they do have to be given their due. Give them a little hope so they can feel good before the Flames come in and sweep them out of that series. But
well, I'm on the record as saying Flames in 5, so we'll see. We'll see if that's right or not. Or it's the case of death.
Thanks for the update, Dave. We will talk to you a little later.
Have a good show, Cory.
Right on. Yes, the Battle of Alberta. You know what a fun thing. Actually, before I get on to the fun stuff, I do want to follow up. I mean, somebody pointed out, because yesterday I went on I think it was Al, went on a rant about how I don't support capital punishment. And I still don't. I do not trust our government enough to execute these guys. I do want them to weld the doors shut, though, on these offenders when they've got them. That's where we got to go. You got to keep them in for life. Like, I'm just... And our copy editor Mike pointed out actually as well that I'd written a column on this as well. One of the women who was murdered was related to me indirectly. It's my son's cousin, and she was murdered by a man again who has a long history of violent offenses. Like, there was no reason that man should be loose. As Dave pointed out as well, this guy who killed a mother of 5, who's on the run right now, who's had 6 attempted murders under his belt already. He's young, and they only charged him with manslaughter. So yes, whenever they catch him, he'll probably be out in a few more years to go out and kill somebody else. It does make it hard to make a case against capital punishment sometimes. I don't sympathize with these killers. I don't sympathize with these murderers. And I wouldn't weep if, they find themselves dead. I'm not terribly sad when you see these types and you hear that they've blown their own brains out and done the world a favor. But again, I just don't trust the system. Canada, as Devin's saying, needs the death penalty. No, it doesn't. Because Canada can't even get the payroll right for its own government. Don't give them the power to kill. We've got enough killers out there. But we do have to lock the violent ones up forever. You have to weld the doors shut. And as I said, just recently, David Milgaard, 23 years, an innocent man, 23 years he was in prison for a murder he didn't commit. And people at that time said, 100%, we know 100% that he did it, because people say it with a lot of others. Oh, we'll only do it in cases where it's 100%. Well, they thought in David Milgaard's case, it was 100%, and it was 100% wrong. There's cases in the United States, because people say with DNA and things like that we can find out for sure, but I'm afraid we can't. There are cases in the States where DNA evidence has been corrupted, it's been tampered with, and that can happen here. As Wendy's saying, the commenter, throw away the key, though. Throw away the key. That I agree with. And if we did something horrible, as we did in the case of David Milgaard, at least you can still cut the welding off of the cell and let them out and let an innocently convicted person out after the fact, because once they're dead, there's nothing else we can do. But either way, I'm certainly not coming off soft or sympathizing with violent criminals. And as I said, when we look at this, with that news from Calgary too, and it wasn't that surprising. We saw it coming. We got a gang war going on. And when these guys, when they kill people, it's almost never a first offense. There's almost always a long string and line and history of violence from these guys. And this one was no exception. So yeah, mother of 5 is killed. This loser is on the run. And if we catch him, we'll let him out again. It's got to change. It's got to change. It's not acceptable. It's an embarrassment as a nation. That one, the details of that case in Hinton with what that sick sexual offender did to that mother and child before killing them, and even after killing them. And this guy was released, as I wrote from the press release from the Edmonton police. They said, this guy's going to do it again. They said he's going to assault a woman, and they said he's going to assault a child, and that's exactly what he did. And they both died because of it. It's just, man, our system's so broken. So we obviously knew, and the worst possible price was paid. But either way, yes, let's get on to something a little more light. I've got lots of time for heavy rants and rambling. Just to go further, actually, I'm going to be interviewing Jean Charest this afternoon. He's put out a release on getting tough on crime. I know he's the reddest of the Tories in the race, but credit where due. He's the first one out of the gate to talk about, let's fix this rotten justice system because it's not serving us and it's failing us. So before I get to our dueling hockey fans here, I do have to speak, well, for one, remind everybody, as we saw with all those stories and as with these two writers, Lee Harding and Arthur Green, have been coming in with us. We've got people all across the country. We're expanding, and it's all due to you guys subscribing with us. I mean, that story Dave was talking about, they get, what was it, trauma counseling for CBC reporters because somebody might have honked at them at a protest? I mean, come on. That's what the mainstream media is, guys, and that's where your tax dollars go. We don't take tax dollars. We're real media around here. If I got traumatized out there and somebody yelled at me, you know that does happen fairly often. Derek won't even give me a hug when I come into the office, but that's the extent of any trauma counseling we would have around here anyways. We're a real news organization, and we rely on you guys for subscribing. And it's what keeps us going. And thanks to all of you who have already subscribed. And if you haven't already, get on there, westernstandard.news/membership, and take one out. Use the coupon code TRIGGERED, and hey, you save $10. It's an investment. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for you to buy a product from us, and we'll keep giving you good stuff. It'll be worth your while. Best $10 a month you could spend. Even less if you take advantage of all those deals. Also, be sure to check out our sponsors. I'm going to speak quickly about them, and that is Bitcoin Well. You've heard me talk about them before. If you're looking at digital currencies, you're curious about them, you want to invest in them, or you're not sure if it's the right thing to invest in, that's what these guys are about. The main thing is keeping your money safe, keeping it secure, working with a trustworthy company. This is a Western Canadian company. They're publicly traded. You know, it's not some blow and go type company that's going to vanish on you with your money. They never have your money. It's non-custodial. They just guide you through the process. And that's the important thing. You want to be safe. You want to learn about it. And they have personalized one-on-one service. You'll sit face-to-face with a person, and they will discuss how and why, and you know, you may get into Bitcoin investments. It's a fantastic service. It's local. It's safe. And if digital currencies are going to be your thing, check them out. BitcoinWell.com. All right, let's bring those hockey clowns in here and get on to something else here. We've got Lee Harding and Arthur Green, both of regular readers, I'm sure, have seen their stories up there at the Western Standard. They are on different ends of the sports spectrum. We got the Battle of Alberta for the first time in over 30 years. Like, boy, you know, you would think this would have happened more often. So, I mean, whatever happens, this is going to be a hell of a couple of weeks here going on. So thanks for coming in and showing your allegiances, guys.
You're welcome.
You can, like Bob Marley said, Cory, it's time to stir the pot, and you see CBC offering trauma support. I think Oilers fans are going to need some trauma support after Calgary runs them over in this series. I predicted five games, such as Dave also predicted it in 5, but we even got Wayne Gretzky's support. Gretzky took to Twitter and saying that Calgary is his pick. Ryan, I know you'll bleed orange after the series. What are your thoughts on Mike Smith, and do you think he can hold the crease?
Yeah, so go ahead there, Lee. I know he's jumped in on you there, and you're at a disadvantage already with that Northern team there, but make your case.
Not at all. No, we're on a permanent power play. We're going to keep winning like we always did. I don't even know if Arthur was alive the last time these two teams played, but just a reminder, 1991, the Flames were up 3-0, and then Mike Vernon pulled his best sieve ever. I mean, Esa Tikkanen took a shot from the blue line, went right through his legs, and then it just went all downhill from there. So Mike Smith's going to be awesome. He's going to take all the shots that Calgary can throw at him and yawn in between them. It's going to be amazing. It really is. It's going to be a spectacle to behold, and I can't wait to see this. It's fantastic. All the fans are going to love it. The enthusiasm is going to be out of this world, and it's really too bad that there's going to be a close encounter of the Oiler kind that's just coming in. Yes, they spotted it now. So, Arthur, I don't know what the counseling's like over there on the Rock, but you might need some.
Well, it sounds like, we got somebody who's kind of living in the past, though. I mean, you're bringing up some really old names. As you said, Arthur might not even be around. So we got some assets with that Flames team this year. Why do you actually, Lee, though, you didn't get your prediction. How many games do you think this is going to take, whichever way it may go?
I think it's going to be a Game 7, and boy, are Calgary going to be disappointed when they lose at that point. It's going to be so devastating. Quite satisfying for me, but devastating for them. It'll be 1991 all over again. What's old will be new.
Okay, well, let's bring Arthur in to give the thoughts. So what assets do you think the Flames have in their arsenal to avoid having 1991 all over again?
For the record, I was alive in 1991. I'm almost 40 years old, but I think the biggest asset that they have is the Calgary fans, and Edmonton fans are great fans, but they don't have the red blood that the Calgary Flames thrive on. And they got a great lineup. They got Johnny Hockey, Keith Tkachuk. We even see Brady Tkachuk in the stands cheering for his older brother, and I got Alf here behind me. He's going to challenge Brady to be the biggest Calgary Flames super fan. But I think the series is going to be a tough one. We're going to see Marian Lucic, and I think he's going to drop the gloves with Zach Kassian if he doesn't do it with Tkachuk first. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, man, Zach Kassian will beat him. There'll be a coffee in one hand and a naked fist in the other. There'll be fists of fury. Bruce Lee will be cheering from somewhere in the beyond. Can't wait.
I imagine it is going to be a pretty physical series. I mean, if we looked at the Dallas one as a history of it, at least, they seem to kind of get it together towards the end because they had to realize that, we have to score goals rather than beat on these guys to win this. But there's probably going to be some fireworks before the end of this Calgary-Edmonton get together, huh?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the first game, it's going to be there. By the seventh game, I don't know. I mean, I just saw an article where they're calling up like about 6 different Oilers to be on the team that are, the spare tires. So I think they're ready. Boy, if there's ejections or whatever, we'll just call upon the endless depth that this team has because, that's what an oil rig has. You can just keep digging deeper and deeper and deeper. There's always more there. Whereas, was shown by the little mascot over there in Newfoundland, Alfie, he looks like a pirate. So the Flames have to steal a win. They can't really earn it.
Alf is actually here in Alberta. We're located in northern Alberta in Bonnyville. But, Ryan, I think Calgary is going to win because Markstrom is going to steal this series. He has the agility. Mike Smith's washed up. You Oilers fans can cry right now. But we got the experience, too, of Daryl Sutter. And Sutter has a plan for Edmonton. He's going to roll the 4 lines. And I don't think that Edmonton has the patience to beat Calgary.
Well, so, I mean, both of you guys, I'll start, I see Lee was a little presumptuous there with the perhaps guessing by Arthur might have a bit of an accent, but all the same, we're going to get that trauma counseling for the Western Standard staff soon, as I was saying before the show started. But you're up at Bonnyville. That's kind of a divided area. I mean, you're going to have a lot of Edmonton fans up there when you go to the bar to watch these games. But I imagine there'd be a number of Flames fans going too. I've tipped back one or two in Bonnyville bars in past times when I was in the oil field. They can get pretty rowdy. I imagine there's going to be some lively sports nights going on up there.
Yeah, they got I'll give a shout out to the Players Lounge. You want to go watch hockey, Players Lounge is the place to do it in Bonnyville. There'll also be a few Newfoundlanders there, I'm sure of it. But it's a great hockey town that we have here. It is divided. I mean, Alberta is already divided enough, but it's just about to get a little bit more separated with the Flames and the Oilers in the Battle of Alberta, which I can't wait for.
Well, then I'll toss a bone to Lee because he's out in Saskatchewan, but they do have, and I know some Calgarians are going to get mad at me for it, but they got the best football fans in Canada out there. But it's also a province that hasn't had an NHL team, so they if they're going to pick their winners and losers, they got to look to Alberta or elsewhere, especially now that this is the last of the Canadian teams. Are there going to be some divided sports bars and some lively nights out there where you're at, Lee?
I think there will be, out here in Saskatchewan, we pick our teams and the Flames fans pick their nose. Really sorry to be assuming over there where you were. I forgot the old acronym for SINCRUDE, so you Newfoundlanders can receive unemployment down east. But it's going to be really, really great. I can't wait to relish this victory and brag for it for maybe another 30 years. And, there have to be some deluded people in this world. We know them. They vote for the wrong political party. They have all kinds of things that we just not quite sure what's going on up here. And, that's fine. It gives you someone to gloat over when your team wins.
Geez, I guess we're going to have to watch it if we get you guys into the newsroom at the same time. Never mind the bars and such.
I'm ready for the steel cage match.
I got a thick skin like a codfish, Cory, and his down into the Flames don't bother me because in 5 games we're going to be celebrating on the Red Mile at the Saddle Dome in Calgary. And Ryan, you can just go back to watching football. You got the Gretzky doll. Yeah, just go back to watching football, Ryan, because the Flames are going to be victorious, and I'm sure of it.
Well, we'll see. There's quite some, a good split going on here. Once we have game 1 under the belt, we might have a better idea. But before we close things out, I see Lee is invested in a lot of talismans and things he think will help him along, from the coffee mugs to the dolls. But, it's going to take more than that, I think, to pull this off. But in closing, give a couple minutes as to why, Lee, you feel that the Oilers are going to manage to pull this off.
Well, they usually do. I mean, even in '86, we felt so bad for you. We just had to score the goal on ourselves. And then 14 years later, give you Steve Smith and Grant Fuhr as our very belated sloppy seconds. We've always been the better team. It's been very frustrating for Calgary. They have a lot of envy over this. It's really too bad. There's lots of wonderful things to love about Calgary, just not their own team when it comes to a confrontation with Edmonton. So, no, this isn't a talisman. This is a nice little mug here that will be full of Flames tears. And I don't know, maybe a Flames tear would kind of sizzle, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be real salty and nice, kind of like the Newfoundland waters in just a couple of weeks.
Well, and I don't know, Flames often burn oil, but is that okay? So we'll let Arthur close up there on his case for the Flames here.
My case for the Flames, Cory, is they got sheer determination and grit. They had the best record in 82 games this season, and I think they're going to prevail versus the Oilers. He can have his cup and all his fancy memorabilia, but Ryan, money doesn't buy happiness, and it's not going to buy an Oilers a win. So. In 5 games, like I said, we'll have this conversation again, and you can tell me I'm right.
That's great. But I mean, all in all, it's going to be a hell of a series. Everybody's looking forward to it. It's going to be really fun to watch this go. I kind of, I'm rooting for the Flames, I got to admit, but all the same, I hope it goes to Game 7, as the other prediction was, just to make the most out of this battle and, such a great matchup going on. So. I thank you both for coming on for writing to the Standard to give your points of view. I'm sure that one of you is going to be writing, or probably just kind of ducking and keeping a little profile after the series, and one of you might chirp up a couple of times afterwards. But time will tell, eh?
Well, we know what time's going to tell, but it's just fun to watch it all play out. And I'm not going to be a sore winner later. I'm going to be gracious to you. I'm just going to say, you know what, we've got some great consolation prizes for you, maybe a nice set of golf clubs and this sort of thing. And there's always next year, right?
The proof is in the pudding, Cory. And like I said, Mike Smith's not going to stop 60 shots a game. So we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on, guys. It was fun and it's appreciated. And it's going to be a hell of a match. So we will check in with you, I guess, after the series and see how everything's going there. So I'll let you get on with the day. And thanks for joining the show today, guys.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Great. That reminder, that's Lee Harding and Arthur Green, both prolific writers with the Western Standard. They were usually write on things other than hockey. But yeah, let's get in and talk about something fun, talk about something different, have a good time. And, you got to have that rivalry. That's part of the fun of the sports, the tribalism. And it's one of those rare matchups, that purely Alberta event that's going on right now. So a lot of people are going to be watching with interest. And, I'm mixed on it. I mean, I know some people are saying it's a distraction from important things. It is, but that's what we need, distractions from important things. I mean, those who were here for my opening monologue know how, upsetting a lot of the news is and how rough a lot of news is. It's good to get out there and lighten up. We're at the end of 2 years of lockdowns, pandemic, restrictions, tension, all sorts of things, protests. Let's have some nights where we can get together at home or at a bar, or if you're lucky enough to get to one of the games, and just take a break, enjoy yourself, watch something, look at these guys, play out there. I mean, they're both actually very strong teams. It's going to be interesting to watch how this plays out. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I'm surprised Lee didn't bring it up. But I think overall the Flames had a harder time with the Oilers this year during the regular season than they typically do. They had a tough time. So playoff hockey is different hockey. So we'll see. But again, Brad asking if I'm a hockey fan. I'm not a super fan. I won't pretend to be one of those, a very skilled one. I'm a fair weather hockey fan. I peripherally keep track of things until we get around playoff time, and then I kind of jump in and pay closer attention. My loyalty to Calgary, I'm not some hardcore fan who's going to pretend that I've always been supportive for decades. It's just that I lived in Calgary for 30 years and now live right next to Calgary, and that's just where my loyalties are going to lie. I mean, when it comes to football, I'm a Steelers fan, so it's not necessarily being close. That I will take a little more confidence in speaking on things like that in that issue. But it looks like it's going to, Lee's still commenting from the background saying, smart to distance yourself from the defeat already. Yeah, okay, here we go. So the shots are going out. But lots of people, Flames fans, Oilers fans, we got both in my scroll. And it's just going to be a good exercise for the province. And it's a good break for the restaurants and bars and things out there as well. I owned a bar for 5 years. And I tell you, that's a tough business at the best of times. And this playoff thing really helps them kickstart into spring. I mean, it pulls the people out. I'm not one of those who believes, by the way, that's a separate discussion with arenas and everything, that sporting events bring money into the city and so on and things like that. This is justification for building arenas that they use. That's not the case. It's people's disposable income. Those who can afford it use it and will go out and do it. It redistributes money. It doesn't create anything. So let's not make any myths. But a product of enjoyment, entertainment, and fun for people. It is a product, and it does help redistribute that. Rather than ordering a pizza in, maybe people will be more inclined to go out to the bar and have a pint and support their local, and again, have some fun with your neighbors. Just have a good time. All those people out in the Red Mile, the people outside the Saddle Dome during those games, it's just gonna break things up after a couple of miserable years we've had, throughout a lot of things. So enjoy it, or don't if you want. But I mean, we got a lot to cover. Just that reminder, tomorrow. What's this? Wait a minute, Brad. I can say the bar's for sale in Hannah. Okay, I'll tell you about my experience with bar ownership. Well, I won't tell you the whole thing. All I'm going to tell you is this. I wouldn't take another bar if it was free. I mean, hey, we made money with the last one, but oh my God, that was the most work for the least amount of money I ever did. And I've spent a fair amount of time in Hannah when I used to work in the oil field too. No way, not a chance. I would not take that place. So either way, we get ready for that Battle of Alberta. Okay, so let's see some of the other things and getting back to the real world again. So we got forecast that, here's some of the stuff. We keep pretending we didn't see it coming. We act as if this is surprising. So there's a forecast of a food price calamity, and consumers are facing a long run-up of rising food prices, higher than those estimated by Statistics Canada. This is a finance committee was told the other day. And one economist last December predicted 5 to 7% food inflation, and now they're saying, no, that's already out of date. Like, this is bad, guys. We've been warning about inflation for quite some time already. All of us weenies. I remember right when my show was starting, I was kind of talking because the inflation took a while to catch up, with all the borrowing, all of the printing of money by the governments, things like that, supply chain issues throughout the pandemic. And I have the Taxpayers Federation, members on quite often. And I was asking Franco about that. Like, why haven't we gotten the inflation during this pandemic? And the reason was because we thought it would come a lot faster with all that borrowing. Economic, logic says so. But everybody turtled, right? Everybody stayed home. So they weren't spending. They weren't putting their money back into the markets. So the inflation got deferred. That's really what happened. I mean, more money still flooded into the market, but people weren't spending it for that first couple of years. They weren't vacationing. They weren't going out. Now it's come home to roost. As Pamela Jones-Kenney saying, gas is $2.33 in Victoria today. A liter. It's nuts. It's cheaper to buy milk, I think. So either way, now we're getting all of these guys talking, holy cow, food and fuel and things like that this is a shock. We're in trouble. We didn't know this was coming. You should have known it was coming. Any economist could have told you this is coming. When you do these sorts of things to the environment, you get inflation. It's just supply or, cause and effect. So I don't know, folks, keep tightening those belts. We deferred the damage that the pandemic lockdowns and restrictions are going to do to ourselves. That's all we did. We kicked the can down the road. We denied a lot of things, but the price still has to be paid, and we're going to pay it now. So just be careful with your money. I'm not a financial advisor, but we have Andrew Ruland. He'll be coming on down the road. He is one. He can have some good advice to give in these times. But one thing I can say for sure, when we're looking at inflation rates getting to the 10% rate, and it looks like we might have that coming, we better be very, very careful with our finances right now. It's this a commenter there. Yeah, Tiggy is saying it's 223 in Chilliwack, $1.74 in Hannah, and he said we're getting that tax break from the Kenney government at least, due to the royalties. But I mean, ours would be over $2 otherwise too. And AB Free saying hyperinflation is real. So the Commons is starting to recognize it. Will the Commons actually do what they have to? Like, there's no quick fix. There's no quick fix at all for this. But they still got to look farther down the road and figure out how to stop this over the longer run. And part of that is, of course, the government's got to stop levy spending. They got to stop borrowing, stop printing money. Easier said than done, especially with this Liberal government. But we got to start, guys. We got a freight train of inflation coming towards us. And another thing that was pointed out was the fertilizer costs have gone up 5-fold. I mean, that's huge. It's integral. And we've had longer discussions. Why is the world population going up so much and we haven't had starvation issues like we used to in the past? Well, part of it's modern farming techniques with modern fertilizer and crop rotations and practices. We can get so much more product out of an acre than we used to. But the fertilizer is critical to that. And now with the cost of fertilizer shooting through the roof, again, something very, very essential to us, of course, which being food, is going to cost a fortune. And we've got the Trudeau government. We reported on that before. I talked about that. They want to start taxing fertilizer. They want to go after that as part of their climate plan too. That's how insane these ideologues in Ottawa are. Trust fund babies like Justin Trudeau, who's never really had to work for a living, never had to sweat making a rent payment, buying an old beater car and trying to make it to work with it. Buying the cheap generic foods to get by because he had chefs and nannies and chauffeurs. He was okay with that. He doesn't understand what his stupid, ideologically driven environmental policies do. But we do. We know what happens. We're feeling it. And then he's got his right-hand henchman there, Gil Bull. Well, he's an environmental lunatic. He's an activist. We've seen all those pictures of him grinning like a lunatic as he's being arrested in his orange jumpsuit for his environmental actions. That's the senior cabinet minister Trudeau listens to. So now, as we're seeing this is being presented to cabinet committees and presented in the House of Commons saying, hey, this fertilizer prices are hurting us and our food prices and our inflation. Do you think Trudeau's going to listen to that? No, he's busy moving ahead because he wants to have as his legacy being the man who saved the world from global warming somehow. And he thinks if we can just tax the heck out of fertilizer enough, that'll be one of more of those steps on how Justin saved the world. Unfortunately, Justin has a 50-50 chance putting his shoes on the wrong feet any given morning, explaining something as complicated as finances, inflation, and having to actually work for a living and pay bills is well beyond his comprehension. So, we got some hard times coming. All I'm saying, guys, is stock up on any cheap foods while you can that keep, and maybe plant a good garden. I'm a terrible gardener, but I keep trying because nothing's going to be getting cheaper for a while. Let's see. We got censorship complaints. Let's see. 1,000 censorship complaints. Federal concealment of public records are running at the rate of 1,000 a month. So the feds, again, not letting us know what they're doing. This is indicative of so much of the bigger problem, right? The government has long lost any possible concept that they're actually supposed to serve us, that we're supposed to tell them what to do, not them telling us what to do. And that information, you see, when the government hides information, refuses to let us see what they're doing with our money and their laws that are controlling our lives, they've lost it. And we have got a big problem. That's our information. That information should all be open to us all the time unless they can prove otherwise. Right now, as it is, the government hides everything they're doing with your life, and you have to come begging and groveling to try and get at it. So public records, 1,000 a month are being complaints about the federal government concealing them. It's from the Information Commissioner, Carolyn Maynard. So a third of cases of federal departments and agencies didn't even bother to acknowledge requests for records from Canadians, from us. It's our records. It says they have an obligation to respond under the law in 30 days, but 62% are meeting those. So 38% aren't. And well, what's the law then? Where do you apply it? When are you going to get on their case rather than just bringing it up in committee? Just open it up. It's our information, but they won't do it. And this has been going on for a long time. In 2018, there was a backlog of almost 3,500 unresolved complaints. Right now, it's about 7,000. This is killer, guys. This is where we are. So she's saying it's going to be up to 12,000 unresolved cases for 2022 by the time it's done. And she said the pandemic's no excuse for concealing records. I got a feeling she might be fired soon. Saying government institutions, and this is the Information Commissioner, so not a cabinet minister or an elected politician. This is a senior bureaucrat assigned for actually standing up for us. It's kind of unusual. That's why I say she'll probably be fired pretty soon. Saying the government's had more than 2 years to adapt to this. The excuse is gone. Boy, it's nice to see these words out of her. Hopefully she finds a good job in the private sector once she gets fired. She says this is not acceptable. When she was asked what's the longest we've had someone waiting for a case to be resolved, she said some cases are dating back to 2010. 12 years. They won't give you your own information about what they're doing with your money, with your life. And you see, that's going all the way back to, it's not even just the Liberals, it's government in general. And that's a sickness. And we're in trouble. They don't know who they work for. So, in 2019, the Federal Court of Appeal offered censure for the Office of Information because of a 10-day delay. But it just won't stop. Let's see, where else are we going to be getting broke before I bring my next guest on for that interview? Yes, higher airport fees. So just a little more bad news to throw on. See, this is why I need distractions with talking about hockey games and playoff series, guys. I mean, come on, we can only consume so much of this negativity in one day. So we got higher airport fees. If you're looking to travel, there's going to be higher user fees. And you see this mandatory airport improvement fees range as high as $42 a traveler. If you ever look at it with those new airlines, I think WestJet did that years ago. Maybe it was another one. They said, we're giving away like $10 flights to Vancouver just to prove the point of how high the taxes and fees and everything were, though, because it was like a $10 flight to WestJet, but then it still came in at like $150 by the time all of the other fees and taxes and things were all tacked on top of it. just to remind everybody where that price is. It's kind of like when you pump your gas too. Some of it's paying for the gas, but a whole pile of it is all these taxes and fees and items that the government puts onto there. Airport improvement fees are another one they keep throwing on there every time you fly around. But it says apparently they've taken on a bunch of debt and not investing it in infrastructure. So we might have to re-examine our flying systems, because I don't get it. Canada's got, I traveled a lot. It's some of the most expensive domestic flights on earth. If you want to bounce around the country in the United States, it's quite cheap. If you want to fly from Calgary to Toronto, you're going to pay through the nose. And yet, despite all of that, apparently all our airports are going broke and have to keep raising their fees in order to make their bills. So I'm not sure what's happening there, especially when they lease out spaces and can manage to charge you $6 for a crappy cup of coffee while you're waiting for a flight. But that's where it's going. It's another area where you better tighten your belt, guys, because the price of everything is going up. All right, I'm going to speak about one more of our sponsors, and then I'm going to play that interview with Conservative Party of Canada leadership candidate Scott Aitchison. And that sponsor is the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Their name says it all. They're an association for people into shooting sports. Whether, again, target shooter or the collector, shooting sports is really broad. The bottom line is we got the Liberal government. They're bringing in a backdoor gun registry. They're trying to take away every kind of shooting enjoyment, whether you're collecting, you're a target shooter, a duck hunter, deer hunter, whatever. It's your business. If you're following the law, you're not hurting people. It shouldn't be a problem. We've got idiotic politicians like Gondek and others who talk about having municipalities banning handguns, or Trudeau's talking about banning handguns across the country. As I was talking about repeat firearm offenders, none of those guys are with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, because that's where law-abiding firearm owners go. And if you want to keep enjoying your firearms responsibly, as you already have been, you got to join these guys. You got to get on with the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. They got all kinds of resources there for you. Plus, they help stand up for your rights against the government that's trying to take those rights away from you. So check them out. Canadian Shooting Sports Association is the easiest way to find them. You just Google it, or CSSA-CILA.org. Take out a membership with them, guys. It's for your own good. It's for your own sake. And they got a lot of resources. Again, it's not like a charity. You get a lot back for what you put in. But okay, I had, like I said, the chance to speak with Scott Aitchison, one of the Conservative Party of Canada leadership contenders, and we're going to run that now, and then I'll be back and chatting to you after. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to the Western Standard Studios, Mr. Aitchison. I've been looking forward to it. We've been watching the Conservative leadership race with a lot of interest. It's been an interesting one already, lively, I guess you could say, and different. A lot of contenders. There's 6 of you going for it, and the campaign's going to be a long one, going all the way till September 10th. So I'm glad we got a chance to speak early, because I'm certain there's going to be a lot of developments as the campaign unfolds.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here. I've my first time at the Western Standard, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, and so you're out west, and you're a member of Parliament from out in Ontario. You've been active in politics for quite some time. So maybe I'll start, I guess, with a bit of your campaign challenges that'll come out when getting across the country. It's a weighted system for the leadership, so many votes per riding. So you certainly have to reach out to every region and develop support and bring that in. How's that been going for you as you travel in your campaign so far?
Well, it's been going well. I as you mentioned, I'm a newer member of Parliament, and probably as famous as a former mayor of small town Ontario community would be. But the message is resonating. We're really pleased with it, and we've been doing an awful lot of social media and digital outreach as well. So touring across the country has been a lot of fun. It's been great to meet Conservatives from coast to coast. Great.
And as I kind of said earlier, with 6 candidates in a field, it's hard to stand out. But one of the things, and I want to talk a bit about the debates, but the first debate, and I watched it, it was the unofficial one, I guess, right, with the Canada Strong and Free Network. The way you stood out, actually, I found to be a calm voice of reason, whilst the others were quite frisky with each other, I guess, to say it politely. But you stuck to your message and you were quiet. But at the same time, it's hard. And I appreciated that. I think a lot of viewers appreciated that. And that's when they discovered you that night, I think. But at the same time, it must be difficult for you, because it's hard to stand out in that crowd when the other two are stealing the spotlight.
Well, I think the tone is really, really important. It's going to be very important in the next election. And I think that when we talk about what's going on in Ottawa or what's not going on in Ottawa, as it might be. I spoke about this most recently in my speech in response to the government's use of the Emergency Measures Act related to the convoy in Ottawa. The way we talk about, dividing Canadians and pitting each other against each other to win votes, that kind of divisive rhetoric and that kind of, zero-sum game approach to politics, winning is everything, it might serve your short-term purposes, but it actually divides the country. And I just think that we need to be, as conservatives particularly, have an opportunity as a truly national party with representation across the country to talk about the things that unites us and brings us together. And I don't think it's easy to do that if we're fighting amongst ourselves. And I think we need to build trust amongst Canadians that live in areas where we haven't been winning. And so the best way to do that is, I think, is with a principled conservative message, but also delivering that message with a tone of respect. We need to be listening to each other and build that trust and show some unity. It doesn't have to be uniform, but we have to be unified.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I mean, the infighting can be devastating to a party, and I don't expect you to speak to our provincial issues, but we are experiencing quite something here, with the United Conservative Party that came in with such a strong majority, and right now in public polling, they're in abysmal shape within Alberta, and much of it's due to the fact that they've all been at each other's throats for the last couple of years rather than managing the province. And as we see, as you said, some of the tone coming out in this race, there's a risk of that. I mean, if you divide the party too much, it could damage the whole.
Well, I think listen. There's no shortage of I think frustration across the country, really, especially related to COVID and lockdowns and the uncertainty of it and the length of lockdowns. There's no question there's frustration and anger. I get that, but just fanning the flames of that anger doesn't actually solve any problems. I think it's important for us to be talking about policy ideas. I think elections are perfect opportunities for us to talk policy. And so instead of attacking each other, we should be talking about ideas that conservatives want to talk about and that we can then talk to the rest of Canadians about and sell our message and form a majority government.
And getting into some of those mechanisms, as I warned you, I did want to talk a little bit about those two debates. They were radically different from each other. The first one, as I said, was very adversarial, very heated, kind of allowed for a free-for-all. The second one was exceedingly moderated, very unusually so, with the paddles and the horn interrupting people and things such as that. I'll just speak my own point of view. I don't think either worked well to communicate the message of the candidates out to people or terribly effectively. What are ways that these events perhaps could be improved? Because we do want to see all the candidates. We want to see that interchange and such, but where can we hit the mark with these sorts of events?
Well, I'm not exactly sure how we can improve them, but this much I do know is that the second debate, while it's certainly a little bit goofy in certain parts, at least there was a little more, meat on the bone. There's a little more policy discussion. I think that's important. We didn't get into, I think, enough policy issues. We didn't really talk enough about foreign policy. We didn't talk enough about housing. I feel like I missed an opportunity to talk more about housing. So it's a bit better for sure. But I guess it speaks to the importance of all the candidates making sure they get their message out and crisscrossing the country and talking to conservatives about ideas to bring the country, move the country forward, and to present a platform to Canadians that will resonate not just in the areas we consistently win, but where we need to win as well.
Great. Now, housing. I mean, that's a big issue. It's an acute one, and you've made it a large part of your platform. Young people, I can't imagine how they can get into the housing market right now. I mean, inflation's hitting us all around. But we've got a massive housing shortage. The supply is the issue. People wanting to get into the market. We've got a labor shortage. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, but it's pressing. I guess that's part of the largest part where you're standing out. Could you want to expand a bit on your housing policy and how you'd like to?
Well, I speak to this issue of housing. It's in part one of the reasons why I left my job as mayor of my community to run federally, because of course at the local level, in Huntsville, we were doing all kinds of things. We were partnering with developers. We were giving land away to Habitat for Humanity. We were waiving fees and doing all kinds of stuff. But what was missing always was a reliable federal partner to help with funding more than anything else, to just bridge the gap on maybe affordable rental units, for example, to make those numbers add up and make sense. And so it's the biggest reason why I decided to run ultimately. And of course, I got to Ottawa and find a Liberal government that is long on promises. They've lots of funding announcements and photo ops with funding announcements, but you haven't seen many ribbon cuttings. And that's because they're just not getting the job done. And so the government, of course, of Canada can't just wave a magic wand and just, tell cities how to run their show. But I believe strongly that the federal government can take leadership, working collaboratively with provinces and cities to help, reduce the backlog. In larger centers, it can take up to 2 or 3 years to get zoning approval and site plan approval and all the approvals required to just get shovels in the ground. When you're in a housing crisis, when supply is the issue, that's not acceptable. Canadians are suffering, and we need to do better. And so the federal government can take leadership by tying the billions of dollars that the federal government assists municipalities and provinces with on infrastructure to real results on the ground. And so I say we can work together to eliminate things like exclusionary zoning. We can increase densities without affecting character in all kinds of neighborhoods all across Canada. And that's something that we absolutely have to get done. Just talking about it and promising money isn't getting the job done.
That's where your municipal experience can apply towards this sort of negotiation. And actually, it's a subject I've been on a lot here in Calgary. We're actually at 8 years right now from plan to development at this point. And of course, your development could be shut down at any point throughout that process too. And that's left us with a terrible backlog.
Well, and this is the thing. I guess it's where I probably, I bring a lot of experience in this regard. I mean, Huntsville's a lot smaller community, but the principles are the same and the process is generally similar. Development and investment they really like certainty. They don't like instability. They don't like uncertainty. These timelines, these processes, there's no reason why there can't be, specific timelines related to getting things done getting through this process. I used to do that as the chair of planning in my community, and then as the mayor, we guaranteed timelines to get reports and approvals done. We didn't skip any steps. We didn't skirt any corners. We didn't loosen the rules. But we made it very clear that these are the rules. You follow these rules, we can proceed. And developers worked really well with that because it was certainty. Just tell us the rules. Part of the problem you have right now in municipalities, in a lot of cases, especially larger centers, you have ward councillors that they kind of treat their wards like their own fiefdom, and of course the loudest voices in the room tend to get the most attention. And you have YIMBYs, and so I've got a YIMBY plan. Yes, in my backyard. We need to increase those densities. We need to improve these processes. We need to speed up the timelines. And the federal government can play a leadership role in working with the provinces and cities to get that done. I speak that language. I've been doing it for years, creating collaboration, partnerships, and moving things forward.
Great. Another area, and it speaks to inflationary values, and it's a spot where you've stood out from other candidates as well. And it's not an issue that you hear a lot coast to coast, but it's supply management. It's Canada's dairy poultry management system. It's been around since, I believe, the early 70s. You're the, I believe Mr. Baber's now come out against it, but initially you were the only candidate who's spoken out against that policy. Why have you decided to take that stance when the others wouldn't?
Well, for me, this is all about affordability, but it's also about opportunity. So supply management costs the average Canadian family about $600 a year in their grocery bill. So it's making milk and cheese and dairy products more expensive. And that's particularly difficult in a time when carbon taxes are making life more expensive and inflation is making life more expensive. I represent people in my community, and I know there are people across this country that are struggling to heat their homes and put real food on the table. The other side of this issue, of course, is that farmers are trapped in a system that limits their potential, limits their opportunity. New Zealand, a country of 5 million people, exported $17 billion worth of dairy products around the world last year. Canada, a country of almost 40 million people, exported 378 million. There's huge opportunity to be unleashed for Canadian farmers that produce world-class dairy products that can market it to the world. And so I don't think this is a question of pitting farmers against consumers. I think it's a question of making life more affordable for Canadian families, but I also see it as an opportunity for the government to assist in a transition away from a system that maintains a status quo and it might be stable, but transitions away from that system and in collaboration and cooperation with farmers helps them create new markets around the world that farmers can then realize a lot more potential.
Yeah, and it's understandable. You can't just flick a switch and stop the system. It would disrupt the entire markets and put people bankrupt. I mean, they're heavily invested in those quotas, but just seeing somebody start to say, well, we've got to set an end to this is finally a good start. So it's
Well, there are vested interests. I mean, I think the dairy lobby is pretty powerful on Parliament Hill, and I just think that they're missing out on an opportunity. And if we work together, we can make Canadian dairy, a coveted products across the world.
So speaking across the country, then getting on a unity, it's a big, broad issue, and it's one in Canada we've always got. Quebec used to be the more acute one. You'd hear more through the 80s and 90s, but now in the West, we're getting pretty upset with a lot of policies out here. One that recently came up was the court ruling on C-69. It's now heading to the Supreme Court of Canada, where we'll see. I don't hold a lot of confidence it's going to uphold the provincial ruling, but we'll see. But we've felt a lot in the West that we've been either ignored or taken for granted, or at times even outright abused by the government. How can you mend some of that national unity right now when people are feeling so divided?
Well, and this is one of the key issues that I think speaks to this divisive rhetoric that we've seen. We've seen a Liberal government for the last 7 years that has been quite happy to demonize Western Canadians and particularly Albertans and Saskatchewan. What's a Saskatchewanian, I guess?
Yeah,
Saskatchewanian,
right, yes.
I guess. But happy to demonize the hardworking folks in these two provinces that are the energy superpower of our country to win votes in downtown Toronto. What we need to talk to each other about is the fact that not only is Canadian energy the most ethically produced energy in the world, but we're bringing in things, oil from places like Saudi Arabia and Venezuela that is not ethically produced. And the other important factor, of course, is that the oil sands here in Fort McMurray has reduced their carbon output on their production by 30% over the last 15 years. They're responsible. These are responsible producers that are doing their part to help reduce Canada's footprint overall. So we need to listen to each other. This is part of the challenge. We need to start listening to each other as Canadians and recognizing that Albertans care as much about the future of this planet as do people in downtown Toronto. And I know there's people in downtown Toronto that think taxes are too high as well. So we need leaders that actually start talking about things that unites us, brings us together, instead of focusing on ways to win elections through division. This is a key area. This is an absolutely key area.
Okay, about and I've asked every other candidate on this too, and it's a tough one, is equalization. I understand it's constitutionally entrenched,
Right.
But there is room to work perhaps on the formula or ways that it's administered and things like that without tearing open the nightmare of the Constitution.
Right.
Would you look at addressing equalization, as many out here feel that perhaps it's not been applied fairly or properly over the last few decades?
Yeah, I actually think that equalization is one piece of a much broader conversation that the federal government needs to have with the provinces. I think that the relationship that exists now between the federal government and provincial governments is unhealthy. And a big part of that is equalization, but another big part of that is our healthcare system. Canadians wear as a badge of honor, almost part of our identity, that we have this amazing healthcare system. It's the best in the world. And the truth of the matter is it's not the best in the world. It's failing Canadians. It's part of the reasons. It's one of the things that I hope we have learned through COVID-19 is that we don't have the best healthcare system in the world. And part of the reason for that is, of course, it was created on a promise from the federal government, meddling in provincial affairs again, to pay 50% of the cost. We've never lived up to that promise as a federal government. And as a result, you see provinces struggling to keep up with, the growing burden of healthcare services. And they're not fiscally sustainable as a result. I think it's time for a more respectful relationship between the federal government and the provinces on all of these issues, and to create more fairness in the system that actually respects the role of the provinces and gets the federal government out of meddling in provincial affairs. The provinces actually run this country. They actually run the country.
A lot could be avoided if we just stick to the jurisdictional things we already have in the Constitution.
And honestly, the federal government was created. You look at the Constitution, the provinces came together and created this federal government for a lot of different reasons. One of which, though, was to actually help create new markets in the world. And if the federal government focused on the things that it was meant to do, things like making sure we have a well-equipped armed services, instead of playing games with provincial services, we could focus on the things that we're supposed to. We wouldn't have embarrassing situations like we have right now, where we've taken decades too long to replace fighter jets that are almost 50 years old. And we would be a reliable partner with our allies. And our allies wouldn't be creating new alliances without us because we just won't show up to the table. We haven't been a reliable partner. So the federal government needs to get back to doing what it was created to do in the first place and start doing it well.
Great. Well, before I let you go, are there some other policy points you want to hit before I let you out of the studio and back onto the campaign trail?
Well, we could talk for hours
Yes,
about policy, but
looking at one perhaps.
But honestly, the biggest thing for me is about affordability. This is a question about affordability for Canadians across this country. I think that this race should be about policies that make life more affordable for Canadians. And I think if that is our message as Conservatives going forward, we will form the next government. We can get rid of a tired Liberal government.
Great. So where can people find more information about your campaign and follow up or support?
It's very easy. Since nobody knows how to pronounce or spell my last name, my website is votescott.ca.
Okay.
It's very easy.
Great. Well, I appreciate that. But I think Mr. Polyev has still had more name mispronunciations going on.
He probably has.
Than yourself. You're second. Well, thank you very much for coming in and joining us today.
Thank you.
And I look forward to talking to you again down the road.
Thanks again.
All right. So, yeah, that was a good chat with Scott Aitchison. I noticed some of you in the comments, I don't know if he's a first choice for too many people. I think that's kind of typical of what we see a lot of, is that they see him as perhaps a second choice or saying he'd be strong in cabinet, but who knows? It might change later. I've always, regular viewers know, supply management's been a burr in my butt for a long time, always ticks me off. And he was the first one to come out against that, at least among all the Conservative candidates. He's his own person. When he came to talking about housing, it's definitely an area where he's strong, because a lot of people forget that the biggest problem we have, housing is an issue that's hitting people across the whole country and very strongly. And people are demanding the federal government do something about it, but it's actually not really their jurisdiction. It's municipal. And that's where a lot of the problems are in the municipalities. That's where the holdups are, backing up developers. And with his years as a mayor, Mr. Aitchison's pretty familiar with a lot of the ins and outs and how that works. And it takes multiple layers of government. But he's been a good, solid candidate. I think in that first debate, he kind of stood out to some people because it was such a loud, raucous debate that was going on between Polyev and Charest, that Aitchison came across like Diana's saying, he sounds reasonable and we need reason. Yeah, he's calm and he answers the questions and he's thoughtful about it. So for somebody I think a lot of us hadn't really heard of a lot out, particularly out west, he's coming across as a good, solid candidate. With this federal leadership race with 6 of them in it, most of them seem to have fairly strong individuals. Patrick Brown, well, I don't know. We'll see what's going on with him. He's running an unusual campaign and coming from an odd direction. But Mr. Aitchison, they're certainly hitting the events and trying to find people's support. And as I like reminding people, it's going to be a long, long race, that one. It's going all the way till September 10th. I'm going to bring things back around a little more provincial. Maybe I'll talk about our sponsor one more time before I do that, and that's going to be just another mention of Bitcoin Well. If you're looking to get into digital currencies, guys, Bitcoin Well, again, is a good Western Canadian company. They will help you out. It's so new. 10 years ago, nobody knew what the heck digital currencies were. We'd never heard of those sorts of things. And it's your money. You work hard for it. You worry about it. Bitcoin prices, digital currencies. As some people pointed out the other day, they go up and down. There's dangers in investing in anything, potentially. So you want to go in as well informed as you can be. And that's what Bitcoin Well does, is they've got layers and layers of information to lead you through it. They show, Bitcoin 101, Bitcoin Academy, teach you whether it's for you, whether it's right, whether it's not. Check them out, guys, if you're interested in digital currencies at all, though. BitcoinWell.com, it's a safe way to get involved and take control of your money. Okay, so somebody else with a busy schedule going on. Oh, actually, I wanted to address, I saw a commenter, Linda, asking about getting Colin Krieger on as a guest. I did put a note out to him. I was at I covered the leadership that night. Just to remind people, it's the Maverick Party. Colin Krieger is now the new permanent leader of them. He got elected with 52%. It was a pretty tight one. I was at the release of that on Saturday night. And I did reach out to see about getting Mr. Krieger on. I have interviewed him before. If you search back in the videos, I've had Colin Krieger on before. And I haven't heard back from him yet, but he might be pretty tired. They were campaigning pretty hard for that leadership. And hopefully we'll get him on to chat with us soon down the road, because that's another federal option that's on the go. And they're certainly having a hard time with this federal leadership going on to try and catch any attention. But they've got a dedicated core of people involved with them. So the party's not going anywhere. Some people say it's not going up. I don't know, but it's not going away. And if they're still there, it means they can still grow. Getting provincial to the hornet's nest we have here. Yes, Jason Kenney, our own Rachel Emmanuel has been out in Washington covering that. Kenny's been out in Washington trying to push for stronger ties between Alberta and the USA. We've had that frustration going on with the energy sector in Alberta. Of course, Joe Biden shut down the Keystone line on us, left us hanging. We've had problems with Line 5 out in Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer fighting against that. So, and of course, we have an imbecile as a prime minister who wouldn't stand up for Canadian oil if his life depended on it. So, I'll give Kenny credit where it's due. If you've got all of those factors up there, at least he's getting out there and going out himself and stepping up for Alberta, whereas the federal government won't. How effective it'll be, I don't know. But, we've got nothing to lose. And he's talking to some pretty serious operators down there south of the border, senators and Senate committees. He's speaking before the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. So, I hope it goes well for him. He should be, flying back soon. As I said, Rachel Emmanuel is out there covering it. And I'm going to have Rachel on Thursday. We're going to talk about mostly about the results of the leadership review, but she'll talk about what she saw out in Washington as well. I think she was going to perhaps chat with the premier as well. And we'll see how long Mr. Kenny's premier. And there's just that, there's the picture of it. Yes, he's out there and doing the pitch for Alberta oil in Washington. It should be a good time to be selling it. The price is through the roof. Everybody's suffering under this supply shortages right now and high prices of fuel. So maybe he's making some progress down there. We're going to find out if these are his last acts as premier or just his latest acts as premier tomorrow night. And I want to remind everybody, we got that special going on. So, normally we do the pipeline on Wednesdays. We're going to be doing a special for the results of the leadership review as they come in. Now, all we've gotten so far from the UCP is a release. They're saying that the results are going to come out sometime between 4 and 6 tomorrow night. I know the Battle of Alberta starts at 7:30, so they better get it out well before that. We're only going to want to sit around so long. But we got a lot of people to talk about it. We're going to start with a panel. It's going to be Dave and Derek and I. So the usual sort of pipeline thing. Danielle Smith's going to pop in and join us. Janet Brown, she's a pollster and commenter in Alberta. We got Andrew Lawton, Peter Guthrie, Paul Hinman, Drew Barnes, Mel Risden. We might pop on here to talk a bit. And Josh Andrus. These are the names I got lined up so far because there's going to be a lot to talk about. The hard part with these live broadcasts, we've been through this in the past when we schedule these things. The UCP gives us, they're as bad as the cable guy. Yeah, I'm going to come between 7 in the morning and 5 at night. Be handy. We don't know exactly when the results are going to come in. Marilyn say, will there actually be any? Not likely. I think there will. They will come out. I just don't think that I'm never confident they're going to be on time. Party things, particularly when it comes to Kenny, he's late with everything when it comes to those things. So whenever they do get released, though, so we're going to discuss things, the thoughts and things like that. And whenever those results come out, we'll still have a good panel of people coming and going to discuss, what it is. What if Kenny lost? Well, we're into a leadership race, a year away from an election. What if Kenny gets 55%? That I think, personally, with my own point of view, is, and as we can see, yes, Nico's put that up, by the way. So the verification process is complete. So all they got to do is count now. They verified all the ballots. And that was done, to their credit, even with live streaming. You could go on and look at a live stream and see people working on it. So, if they were doing anything sneaking or doing anything wrong, you could actually kind of look over their shoulder. And I guess tens of thousands of people tuned in just to kind of look. Probably out of curiosity. I had a look. I got bored after a minute. But it's been pretty transparent. So that's complete. Starting tomorrow at 11, they actually start ripping open the real ballots and counting them. And theoretically, we'll have something to report on at that time. And we'll be talking, so as the show goes, we'll break in. And as I said, if he comes in with 55%, though, getting back to where I was, that's scary because now he's said 50% plus 1 is enough to stay in. Well, technically, maybe. But is that really enough support to hold that party together? Like, he's got a caucus that's just in disarray. Community or constituency associations are all over the map. They're furious. Side parties are rising. His own party numbers are in the support toilet across the province. And if he stays in at 55, I think that turmoil is just going to keep dragging out. Personally, at least I think the plan, in my view, that Rachel Notley would love to see the best is Kenny coming in with like between 50 and 55% and then staying on as premier, because the UCP will just continue to rip themselves to pieces while she'll be able to come in and be a premier for another 4 months. If Kenny loses, we'll go into a leadership race. As a lot of people have pointed out, though, that there's not a lot of, we'll see. Danielle Smith said she would run for it. Brian Jean said he'd run for it. There's a lot of people don't feel they'd like to see either of them as premier either. So maybe some other candidates would rise up. It would be a race and get that done. I mean, with a general election a year away, that you got to get that finished. And then there's also, if Kenny came in with 75%, well, that would be a strong mandate. And that's where he'd be able to say, okay, we've done this. We've checked it. 3/4 of the party supports me. Now let's get together, unify, and move towards the next provincial election. I don't know if it's going to be that high, though. From all indications I'm hearing, it's not going to be 75%, but we will see. I don't know. These are bizarre, weird times, but I think for Kenny to hold it together, he needs a strong result, not 50% plus one, even if that's what he's claiming. I guess if it came in at 55, that's where he would have to do some soul searching and just, figure out what he's going to actually do going forward from that point. All right, so let's review a couple more stories as we move along and wrap some things up here. Here's a story. As interest in electrical vehicles soars, and I don't know if it's soaring that much, experts say they haven't quite hit the mainstream. These stories, right? Like, they just love to make it sound like everybody wants into electric cars. They don't. They always act like they're shocked when they find out they don't. We don't want them, guys. They might get there eventually, but we don't want them yet. These things are expensive, they're limited, and they're not free. People talk about how cheap it is. Oh, you just charge it up. Electricity isn't free either, guys. It's going up. So, that is a cost. And of course, the cost of its car is huge. And then we're finding out the resale isn't that great, because when you want to replace all the batteries, which they do wear out, it can cost 10 or more thousands of dollars. Again, the day might come. Maybe your electric cars will become very affordable, very efficient, chargeable, be able to go a long range. As Wendy was saying, no, we don't need them in rural Alberta. No, you don't need them in any rural area, or not a matter of need. They're not practical. I don't want to go out in -40 in an electric car and see how far I can go in a rural drive. Think about family trips. There's one of those big things. Like, these electric guys are almost like cultish with how they push these things. They're just fixated on it. And think if you're doing one of those family road trips. Many of us have endured them. Many of us will do more. You're going to drive out to Aunt Martha out in Winnipeg. You got 2 days on the road to do. Well, guess what? Every 4 or 5 hours, you've got to stop and charge that thing. Fast charging takes like 20 minutes, I think. And a full charge is like 3 hours. So what do you do with the screaming kids and the dog and everything over that period of time? I guess you got to keep sitting in restaurants or sitting in the car staring at each other, or go out and play hopscotch or something. And then you got to think, we don't have the infrastructure. Think of the thousands of cars on highways, and think of a gas station where every vehicle is taking 20 minutes to 3 hours to charge. How many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of new gas stations are we going to need to keep up with that? They're trying to put the cart before the horse here. The world might go electric, but we aren't there yet. And how they keep expressing surprise and shock when it turns out we don't want those bloody things yet. No matter how hard they subsidize, no matter how much they punish us for daring to want good, efficient, cost-effective combustion vehicles. The news keeps going, though. They keep pushing. CTV, the usual. All right, well, let me see. Let's see what we're going to get to tomorrow. It's an interesting, I'm going to have an author on, Lydia Perovic, and she wrote a book recently, and as an immigrant from Yugoslavia, the former Yugoslavia at that time, into Canada. She's just got some unique views and different ideas she put into her book as her thoughts as an immigrant in Canada isn't turning into what she'd hoped it would be. And, as a person, a new Canadian, she's not finding it to be what she wanted to be. So we'll see where she is. It was an interesting read. They sent the book here, and we'll talk to her about what motivated her to write it and what she thinks going forward. Also, I'm going to have Councillor Dan McLean on. We've talked with him before. He's the one who stirred a lot of people up in the city of Calgary. He's a city of Calgary councillor because he dared to go out on the LRT and take pictures of some of the crap he saw in there, and a fellow overdosing or passing out or something and falling on the floor, and he tweeted that out. But the bottom line is he's speaking up against the crime problem we have on our public transit systems. It's not just Calgary, it's everywhere. And he dared to propose charging fares, putting in things like turnstiles to make sure people pay for their tickets before they ride the train. So we'll have a discussion to see how that's been going and where he's gone with it. And, it should be lively. So tomorrow is going to be a very busy, full-packed day. Danielle Smith's going to be on in the morning at 9 with her regular show. I'll be back at 11:30 with those two guests. And then starting at 3:45, we're starting our special on the United Conservative Party leadership review results. And a whole number of guests will be coming on to talk and speculate, and we'll see what happens. So thanks for tuning in with us today, guys. I will see you all tomorrow at 11:30 a.m.